Welcome back to Awakening to Conscious Co-Creation with your host, Peter Tung. And I have with me today Steve Bhaerman. And Steve, I'd love you now to tell us a little bit about what you have learned from the experience of writing and performing comedy in the guise of the Swami.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I spent my deformative years in New York City, and there's something about New York where humor is cultivated very easily. However, when I was a kid, a lot of the humor was rough and tough, and people expected to be insulted. That was part of the game that people played with one another. I think probably to keep anybody from getting too big of a head. And so my humor was like that. And then about 30 years ago, this character flew into my head, Swami Beyond Ananda. I told people I got struck by enlightening during a brainstorm. And having the Swami as a cohabitator of my body and a teacher of comedy, I've realized that so much of comedy in our lifetime, certainly over the last 50 years, has become dark and cynical. It's hard to remember back to a more innocent time where comedy was more open-hearted and friendly. You know, we've somehow got being hip all mixed up with being cynical. And so what I've learned from the Swami is that when you bring the love back and the innocence back into the realizations and revelations that you get from the insights of comedy, that you can open the heart and create a sense of connection, defenselessness, and so on. And that's been the kind of work that I've been doing with Swami for the past, performing professionally for the past 25 years. And there's a story, I'll share the story with you. This is a true story, something that happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis that, to me, expresses this higher octave of humor. And during the missile crisis, there were some American and Soviet delegates who had been meeting to discuss possible trade between the two countries. And when news of the missile crisis hit, everything stopped, and there was tremendous tension in the room. And finally, one of the Soviet delegates raised his hand and said, "I suggest we each go around and tell a joke." And he volunteered to start. His joke was, "What's the difference between capitalism and communism? In capitalism, man exploits man. In communism, it's the other way around." And, of course, the joke landed really well because it celebrated what we all have in common. It pointed out the mental foibles, and yet it gathered people around the commonality that we share as human beings, and everybody laughed and they were able to continue their business. So primarily, the lesson I've learned is that in open-hearted humor is a way of bringing people together, and there is usually a aha after the ha-ha. And my website's called Wake Up Laughing. So the idea is that laughter is a gateway to awakening our spiritual awakening, and also awakening creativity, awakening new solutions, because it jars our already way of thinking.
So where does the inspiration or the insight for the humor come to you? How does it come to you?
Well, I've always had humor. I was very fortunate. My dad was a brilliant comedian, although not a professional. He was a great storyteller. And what I remember from being a kid is that his humor never really hurt anybody. It was humor that tended to bring people together, and I guess I got it under the radar. And then when I was a kid, I was the class comedian, and apparently you know that you're chosen for this. The sign from God
yes.
is the first time you're sitting in the lunchroom and you make some other kid laugh so hard that milk comes out of their nose. Oh, it's a sign from God, that sort of thing happened. And then, I kind of put that aside, tried to get serious and so on. And, when people say a funny thing happened, often that's the universe's sense of humor, a little trick that we get played on. So I thought I was having a career as a college professor at Wayne State University in Detroit. What a funny thing happened. I got laid off from my job, took a job doing tree work, and while I was there, a coworker and I started a humorous newspaper for the other guys at the shop. And that changed the entire vector of my life as I noticed the power that humor had to break trances, to allow new ideas to come in under the radar, to create a sense of playfulness and excitement in a workplace that was otherwise pretty dull.
So perhaps this would be a good time for us, Steve, to hear from the Swami himself and perhaps some snippets from his State of the Universe address.
Okay, well, he's been patiently hovering over here on this flying carpet, so shall I have him come over?
Absolutely.
Okay, hold on. Well, hello. I'm still floating on the magic carpet, so technically I'm on the air.
Hi, Swami. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. And, every year at this time I offer the State of the Universe, so I'm happy to tell you that the universe is doing just fine, ever-changing, same as always. It is purring in perfection. But down here, of course, we have some challenges, and of course, this last year was a very, very challenging year. We've had a lot of separation and polarization everywhere. I'll tell you something. We humans are even more polarized than ever. Even Poland is polarized. Did you know that? You've got the North Poles and the South Poles. And, of course, we're talking about peace in the Middle East, and we don't even have peace in the Middle West, because in America, we have a deeply divided body politic. Half the population believes our election system is broken, and the other half believes it is fixed. So we've got a lot of problems in this country, but you know what? Here's good news. The changes have already taken place, and in fact, the headline of my State of the Universe is called "The Shift Has Hit the Fan and All Heaven is Breaking Loose." Now, a lot of people are saying, well, if all heaven is breaking loose, I don't see it. I mean, where the hell is heaven? Okay, well, here's the thing. Heaven is inside of us. Heaven is not out there. Heaven is in our own hearts. And all the people who are hell-bent on finding heaven outside themselves, well, they're having a hell of a time. Okay, so because heaven is broken loose, it is up to us to put the little pieces of heaven together to create one big piece. And that is our job. So that is our mission. Because I'll tell you something. We are here to regrow the garden and have a heaven of a time doing it.
Swami, perhaps you could just tell us your feelings about the role of community in this new time that we're moving into.
Well, community is very, very important. And I call it calm unity. Because let's face it, we get all excited. Anger has become the latest rage. And so it's very easy to get excited. And, of course, I've developed a technique called tantrum yoga to help you release your anger and use it to heat your home in the wintertime. But what we really need is calm unity. We need to, I had my own sitcom. I just sat calm. And feeling the unity and the coherence with this universal heart, because up in our heads, we have beliefs that separate us. And believe me, what people believe is unbelievable. So what we need to do is we need to leave the static of the head for the ecstatic of the heart. Because the more we expand our hearts, the less we will need to shrink our heads. And as we sit in calm unity with our hearts fully expanded, then we can connect up with other human beings and weave a web of mass construction as we recognize that we are all in it together.
So important to understand and realize that we each have our own individual requirements to move forward on this path and shift into our hearts.
Oh, you're absolutely right. In fact, I say that each of us is totally unique, just like everybody else.
But it's so much easier when you have other people around you of like heart who are also on this awakened path and making this shift, and we can do it all together. So that harmonious connection between our hearts makes a significant difference to the individual's path.
Oh, you're right. There is no harm in harmony. And that's right. I think that it is very, very important that we begin to gather in the land of the heart, because instead of this fear-based homeland security, we need to have love-based heartland security as we gather around the heart core values. And that way, the golden rule can overrule the rule of gold.
Very good, Swami. I really appreciate the play on words that you use to bring some wisdom into our hearts and minds at this time with your humor.
Well, I'm glad I've had a chance to impart some particles of wisdom.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and may the force be with you.
And feel free to chip in at any time during the rest of the show, too.
Okay, I'm going to go kick some things in right now.
Okay. So we've talked about the love from Len and the laugh from Swami and Steve. So perhaps we should talk a little bit about my role, which I guess is to keep things together. But I guess the piece that I bring to the puzzle is the ability to synthesize what appear to be somewhat diverse pieces of information and bring it all together to make sense for people. And so one of my roles is to pay attention to what's happening in the world and to bring the information forward on a current basis to help people to understand exactly how this is unfolding. And so, for example, the whole energy around the solstice and the lunar eclipse, and now the solar eclipse, which is coming up next week on January the 4th, is another opportunity for us to seed our new pieces into the year. And when we return after this break, I will explain exactly how that's going to be working for all of us. This is Peter Tung for Awakening to Conscious Co-Creation.